So let's talk about Hayato Inamura. So to give a bit of background on him, as we always do, so he's a 23-year-old Japanese centre back, joining on an undisclosed fee and wearing the number 25 shirt to honour Nakamura, the Celtic legend, of course. So lots of good vibes straight away. And you look into his history, and as it is with Celtic players, it's very clear the recruitment team likes good characters. There's also good vibes. He comes from a sporting family who grew up in Mabashi, which is in like the center of Japan, of the main island, I'd say. He went to the local high school when he started playing football there. Got to a very decent level, and late on in that time he converts from defensive midfield and right back, like he's bouncing between those positions, to going straight into the centre back position, and which is something I think that you will see in his development today, that experience in other positions further forward. He joins Toyo University, and as a standard Japanese players, they tend to go to university and then graduate into the J League and get picked up there. He was picked up as a special designation player, I think it's called, from Albirex Niigata. He was picked up 2 years early as well, so he was picked as their special designated player in 2023, and he only started playing regularly for them in 2025. I think it was still like just over halfway through his studies. So pinpointed early, let's say, because you only get 3 of these players per year as a club. So they chose it on a player who wouldn't even play for them straight away. So clearly he was rated very highly. They allowed him to train as well. While in 2024, he's at the university, he's doing his studies. He's also playing for the university team, and he's also getting minutes for Nagata in the cup. He's not playing in the J League necessarily, but in the cup, and he has a very very big year. So he helps Nagata reach a cup final. I think it's the Emperor's Cup final, I want to say.
Oof.
I believe he also wins a cup with his university team as well. And on top of that, he still goes on to do very well in his studies as well. So had a very special year in 2024, and that was, like I said, before he starts playing regularly in the J League. I think he only made 5 starts in the league actually in 2024. He's been a lot more regular this season, but unfortunately, Nagata, who were only a recently promoted side in 2022, so they've been more around the lower reaches of the table anyway. They are not having a good season at the moment. I think they're halfway through the season, or just over halfway through. They're sat 19th in the league, um, second bottom. So Celtic have taken Inamura at a time when he hasn't been in a particularly good team, and you know, if you had feelings to be skeptical, that's probably been compounded by one of the first things you probably saw about this signing, which is one of the first things I saw, was Brendan Rodgers' comments. Brendan Rodgers saying, uh, he's a part of an investment of the club, was his words, which makes it sound like he's very much a club signing. And I saw he also spoke about, didn't hear about the idea, let's see how he is, maybe he has to go out on loan. So he didn't seem confident. Am I reading these vibes correctly?
Yes, Alex, yes, it is. See that Japanese flag, white background with a red circle in the middle? Just colour it all in red. This is a big old red flag for me. This seems like history repeating itself. So you weren't with us at the time, but Brendan Rodgers' first stint at Celtic got to his third season in pre-season. Celtic missed out on John McGinn, and it seemed like a total disconnect with the transfer policy and board and Brendan Rodgers. We signed a player, Marian Shved, and Brendan Rodgers said, I have a million wingers on talking about signing this guy. So it felt like there was a big disconnect. Celtic missed out on John McGinn. He went to Aston Villa because Celtic were dilly-dallying, and the whole window was a disaster, which led to Brendan Rodgers leaving that season. Brendan Rodgers' contract is up at the end of this season. Fans are wondering, is he committing? It doesn't look like he is. Are the board going to back him? And then one of the first signings, proper signings, if you can call it that, we make, Brendan Rodgers comes out on one of the first days of pre-season and says he's a club signing, and it just doesn't feel right at all. With this guy as well, from the profile, like you're saying, like he's obviously a smart boy and he's good at what he does, but it doesn't seem like the type of profile. Why do you bring in a 23-year-old, loan him out for a year, and then think he's going to be part of the first team. So I am big old red flag with this one alongside other people, but I'm hopeful that he might be able to charm me and win me round with him. But I am not too sure, and it doesn't seem like the manager's too sure on him either. What did you see in the numbers then that give you cause for concern or cause for optimism?
Well, the numbers are very interesting. They always are interesting to me, as you know, and rarely interesting to you. But tell you one man they are interesting for is Hayato Inamura, because one of the reasons he chose the club, I believe Nagata, to move to, was their ball possession. I've got a quote here actually. He said, like, upon joining, according to the data, the team has the most ball possession in the J League and plays attacking football. So I'm glad I've joined this team, and that holds true, despite them being like pretty poor in position wise in the league. They've held around 55% of the ball this season. They play quite a lot of short passes as well, and in terms of like attacking metrics, they rank pretty well. So Inamura, he pinpointed this team out for their style of looking to suit him, let's say. And I think that shows like in his numbers as well. He's like, we often talk about Celtic players, Celtic signing, sorry, particularly centre back, saying, well, they've got a very big adjustment to make because they're coming from a relegation team, in this case, and they're often completing 30, 40 passes per 90, and they're joining a team where they're going to be expected to complete over like 70, 80 passes, and they're not going to be asked to hoof the ball forward. They're going to be asked to break the lines. And in this regard, actually, there's some promise with Inamura. He's not one of those players. He's completing close to 70 passes per 90, over 5.5 long balls per 90 as well, accurate ones too. So there's some good range here. And on the defensive end, there are some decent metrics. As we'll get into, it's not all great, but he holds a 76% tackle success rate from this season at the moment. Now, defending itself is a very hard thing to gauge through numbers. So it's something I think you can mainly have to do on the eye test, much more on like strikers, for example. But there are some numbers you can look at, and 76% tackle success rate is promising. Let's say in this regard.
That's interesting. When you hear that his team are bottom of the league, you think, oh, why are we signing a guy from the bottom of the league? The play's not going to translate. So that is interesting. There was some sort of rumours that he was possibly going to be left back up to Kieran Tierney, but doesn't really sound like it compared to that. The big concern we have is when you hear about this guy, he struggles with the physicality of the game. So with that physicality, do you think he's going to be, or lack of physicality, should I say, do you think he's going to be suited to Celtic? How does he compare to the centre half Celtic have the now?
Yeah, we can really paint a picture here on the concerns over physicality by comparing him to Liam Scales. You
Oh,
might be able to
Jesus.
see a graphic on screen at the moment, actually, or a graphic that goes out from this of Inamura compared to Scales, and I've just clicked up on your reaction. It's the delayed reaction there. Liam Scales, I know you've got many words to say on him, but
Yes.
from the Celtic games I've watched, I think one of the issues I've had with him is he's not as dominating as Cameron Carter-Vickers, let's say, defensively. And I mean, of course, there are league disparities between the J League and Scottish football. I would argue Scottish football is much more physical, and even then, Hayato Inamura is lagging behind him in terms of ground duel win rate, area win rate, and some other defensive metrics as well. So, it definitely on paper, it paints a picture of someone who isn't the most physically dominating. And to be fair, again, this is someone who played defensive midfield and fullback when he is younger. And as we'll get into, I don't think this is the side of his game where where you get the value from him.
Hmm. Right, okay. That's great. Scottish football, very physical. We've got brought in a guy who's not very physical. But Alex, I know I'm down on this signing. The stats, okay, you can't always see what you want to see in that. Comparing them to another player might be a bit unfair. What about the match notes? What did you see when you watched this guy that impressed you or you weren't very impressed with?
Well, let's give a bit of context first. So we've described his team so far being a bit more possession based than you might expect from a relegation level team. And that really shows in Inamura. He plays generally in a back two, in a four at the back system. He's consistently trusted, like tactically speaking, to bring the ball out from the back, carry forward into space, and really progress the ball through the lines. It's very much actually what you'd expect from a Celtic centre back. So tactically, I didn't see too much like in possession difference from what you might expect from Celtic. Same goes for out possession as well. His side aren't necessarily like super high pressers. I don't think they rank that well for like possession gains, for example, in the final third. But you still see him like trusted to jump up and press in certain moments, and also having to defend like in isolated fashion, like on the counter, for example. So it's not like this guy's protected defensively. So I can like tactically, you can definitely see why he has been pinpointed by Celtic's recruitment. It's not just they've plucked the Japanese version of Ryan Shawcross out and go, well, this guy will probably be great, won't it? Now let's get the physical stuff out of the way. If anyone
Ryan
unfamiliar with,
Shawcross, how's he got in there, man? What a throwback.
and I don't know where my brain goes sometimes, honestly, but it goes next to the physicality, which we always go to: tactical physicality, psychological, and the technical stuff. So physicality, let's just get it away. Yeah, he's not that strong. He's not that tall either. I think he's about 6 foot. I think 185 centimeters is somewhere a number I had, but I mean, you can tell with him he's a little lightweight. I've seen him get bulldozed by some like big strikers at times, which isn't yeah, it's not reassuring because the J League doesn't have many big strikers. There's not many players there who can dominate, I would say, in Europe in the way they do in the J League. So a little worrying that he can get beaten to headers and he can get beaten to duels. In terms of headers, actually, he's got quite a good leap, I'd say, but he just can get stuck under the ball and struggle to push people out the way. There is a bit of relief in the physical section. I think he's got a very good burst of acceleration, and that combined with his reading of the game means there's been a few occasions I was watching where he's able to leap out of the back line very quickly and intercept an oncoming pass. I'd say like psychologically, sorry, these are probably like the area. This is the category where you could find a lot of strengths. For example, under pressure, I think he's very calm and composed. If he spots space, he'll carry into it. In terms of his passing, he tends to make decisions very quickly. I think he's got good vision over short and long range too, like passing, um, like whether it's a central midfielder between the lines or like a long ball over the top. He can also deceive players as well quite well with his like body language. So he might shape to pass one way purposely and then reverse it and go back the other way. And then like back to the defending stuff. Like I said, I think he's got good instincts in terms of aggression, like jumping out of the back line in terms of pressing. I think as well he had really good backline behaviour. So backline behaviour as a centre back is how they react to what's happening in front of them. Is the ball about to go over the top of me? Do I need to run back and defend here? Should I be playing an offside trap in this moment? Should I be jumping out and pressing? I found that Inamura in particular was pretty good at orienting himself for, okay, the ball's back over the top. I need to turn and make sure we don't get done here on the counter or like on the ball over the top, let's say. And I think that's impressive in a team that's clearly not doing very well defensively. I'd say in terms of box defending as well. So like how he's defending the box, self-explanatory, but how is he defending crosses, for example? How is he defending the space like in the back line? Again, I was pretty impressed. Like lots of scanning, trying to make sure he's aware of his surroundings. Thinking he could get drawn to the ball a little bit here, but like just describing as a player, I think he's generally pretty aware and positioning himself well. Now we'll stick with the defensive side when we talk about like the technique. I think in terms of his tackling, he's got very nice technique. Like it's very textbook, let's say, in how he slide tackles and how he standing tackles. He tends to tackle with his weaker foot as well, which is really nice because it means he's not leading, let's say, with his preferred left foot when he doesn't need to, or when it might be easier to lean with his right foot, he does so. And that means if, let's say, a winger tries to cut inside of him, he can use his right foot to stop them rather than having to twist his body and try and tackle with his left. And again, as you've probably picked up here, on the ball, technically speaking, there's a lot to like. Like I think he's a really good passer, actually. There's just a lot of nice range of technique here. You've got nice like chipped balls over the top. You've got some nice drives. be it over long distance or short distance as well, driven into the block, a player's feet. He was just really flat on both feet as well, and flat in a good way. Like his passes don't bounce. His passes stay flat on the turf, which means the person who receives them can take one touch and just go, which is like very handy for a possession-based team. And same with the weight as well. Like his passing weight, if he's playing a ball in behind, he's generally quite nicely weighted, so the goalkeeper can't come out and get it, but the defender's not going to beat the striker to it either. Like this kind of extends as well to just his on ball quality. I think just to round this section off is you watch him and you think, okay, physically he may look like a centre back in a bad way, but also in a good way. He turns very quickly. He's very press resistant. He looks like a midfielder quite often. So I think the best way to describe him here is just a ball playing centre back. I have in my notes, I've described him as the Japanese Pau Torres, and he's a
Oh,
defender who I absolutely adore, and a lot of people hate because he's not that great. And to be honest, look, I know Brendan Rodgers has played this signing down, so I think it's now my duty to try and prop him up and bring his confidence back up. And a team like Celtic, I think that is maybe more than most other teams in the world. We can get away with having a defender who's not amazing at defending. Maybe you don't have to use him in Champions League games, but if he helps you pulverise the league a lot more, I know Rangers aren't exactly competition at the moment for you guys, but if they do become competition, it does become important for you to keep trouncing away the lower reaches of Scottish football. If you have a defender who's very good on the ball and can play that, line splitting pass and get assists or like pre-assists, that is helpful.
yeah, it definitely is. And Brendan Rodgers spoke about towards the end of last season wanting a player that can play diagonal balls, and you sort of mentioned that his range of passing. Big worry I have about this guy is like Celtic have got a lot of faults I feel in their team, and bringing in a guy who can maybe get Celtic playing quicker and playing through the lines better will be good in some way. But one of the big weaknesses for Celtic is on set pieces. Celtic can have all the ball and give away a set piece, and then they've let in a goal from it, and they're sort of chasing the game. And when we've got Inamura here, who's good at most of the things you'd want to be with Celtic, but there's one huge discrepancy here where it is really going to hinder, because I don't think Celtic are the most physical team anyway. So taking this centre half out, who's meant to be one of the physical ones, and putting in a less physical guy, I just don't see how it's going to work for Celtic. And Brendan Rodgers obviously thinks along the same lines. But what would you say is the main strengths and the main things he's got to work on, just to sum that up there? Because there was quite a lot in there. There was a lot more positive than I thought there were going to be.
Yeah, I think we could select a lot from the positives actually, like you said, but I really want to focus on the passing. But there was one clip in particular that I've picked out where he like I picked out for myself where he's got the ball at near the halfway line, and there's like his striker making a run in behind the defense, and there's still quite a lot of bodies between him and them, and maybe other defenders in this situation go for a lofted ball for the striker to bring it down, and he probably won't be able to run through on goal, but at least you get further up the pitch. But he drives the ball in between like two defenders who are close to each other, right into the striker's path, and he's receiving the ball at his feet, right in front of the defense. It's a brilliant pass. There's no like shame about it. And it's the sort of thing where, okay, he had time and space to execute it, but I don't see why that wouldn't work in Scottish football unless the pitches are worse, which might make the ball bobble a bit. But that's going to affect everyone, right? In terms of his biggest weaknesses, we mentioned physicality. I will just take this moment to highlight as well, and this is quite, I guess, a big thing in a sense, but like it's just the general defensive level. In Like I said, it's very hard to analyze centre backs, but I did mention he's very fast off the mark. I'm not sure he's the fastest in terms of like your sprint speed, and I think there is just elements to his game we need to improve. He is a young player, and there was like one clip in particular I think that was particularly embarrassing where a ball goes in behind the defense, he's running towards it, and he should get to the ball first, but due to a combination I think of his like lack of top end sprint speed and also like him not using his football brain well enough, the striker beats him to the ball. Like, so him and the striker, they're both running parallel towards the ball, and I think there's a point where Inamura should think, I'm not getting to this first. I need to make contact with the striker. I need to get in front, my body in front of him and slow him down, which is what I think the other centre backs do in Scotland, in the Premier League, etc. He doesn't. He goes for the straight sprint race and he loses out, and it's a goal his team just didn't need to concede. So he definitely would have learning to do, but I think the profile of passing is like that strength shouldn't go unnoticed, even if the defensive part of a defender's game is still the most important.
A lot to learn then. Do you think this? You said he's a young, he's a young guy. Yes, he is in the sense that I'm a lot older than him, but he's not a young footballer. But is that a bit different in Japan because of the university path that players go through? That he's maybe not got certain like game savvy yet because he's came into the game a bit later than a lot of the Japanese players do. I wonder if they're sort of seen as late developers in footballing terms because they come into it a bit later. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. This is something that I was thinking about when watching him. Like as we said, this is really his first season as a starter in the J League, and going back to his background, he's been very dedicated to becoming a professional footballer. I think he mentioned at one point there was, uh, you know, he wasn't allowed to play even though he was on a top team because he was complaining too much about like wanting to play every game and getting a bit arrogant. He's been very dedicated to get professional, and this is still very early in that journey. Like he may be 23, but I think of 23-year-olds in Europe right now who they've clocked up nearly 8,000, 9,000 minutes. There was a couple of players I watched at the weekend in this category. Whereas here, I haven't got the minutes in front of me, but I'd be surprised if it's over 2,000 league minutes, right? So he's still very young career. And of course, the caveat here is physically, sure, he's going to probably last longer than someone who's played a lot more minutes than him at an earlier age, but is he going to be when he's 39? Sure, he might still be fitter than other 39-year-old European players, but he's not going to be as fast as he is right now. He might not be as strong as he is right now. So he'll just have to rely on those mental characteristics. And in fairness with him, like I think some of his strongest traits are mental ones, these psychological ones. So this is a really good point to consider. And even if Brendan Rodgers isn't a fan of him, even if he arrives at Celtic and is sent out on loan, and like you said, your nightmare scenario, Brendan Rodgers ends up leaving in the near future. There's no reason why, like 2-3 years, Inamura can come back into the team, and as a he might be a 26-year-old age wise, but in terms of experience, he might look more like a 21, 22-year-old.
Interesting. Do you think this signing would look a lot better if this guy was the exact same but 19, 20 years old?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I think he'd also look a lot better if the manager hadn't come out and said he's a club signing.
Yeah, that would help, Brendan. That would help. So that brings us on to the question: is he going to fit in? Is he good? The manager's kind of answered that for us already, hasn't he?
He has a bit, but you did intrigue me at the start when you said maybe he could be back up for Kieran Tierney. I actually kind of like the idea of him as maybe like an alternate option at left back, like a maybe an inverted left back
Yeah.
who comes inside, plays passes forward, and like we said, he might not be strong enough playing centre back, but I think he'd be like a bit more physical at left back, right? And that is an interesting thing to point out. So he might not. Maybe his future isn't at Celtic as a centre back. He might even be. It might be at fullback. It might even be at number six, which is a position he played when he was younger, and the passing traits are good. As and if he's got a good reading of the game, maybe that's a position he can play as well. I will say, like to round off, I know as we said, there's quite a lot of negative connotation with him. Having read on a couple of Japanese players now that Celtic have been linked with and they've signed, the thing that's always stuck out to me reading out about them is how detailed their research is and how detailed their preparation is, and just like their training and like the attention to detail in analysis. That the league produces very switched on players who I think physically aren't always the strongest or the quickest. Like they aren't more power. They're not the most powerful athletes all the time, but very smart players and very technically competent players.
You always look for the positive. You're a positive young man. Do you like the signing?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think that there's enough to see here. I think it's low risk, potentially high reward. Maybe he comes in and like other centre backs from Asia recently, I think of Kim Min Jae, he really works out. There are definitely qualities here that I genuinely think he joins Celtic to be like one of their better players on the ball. So certainly in terms of passing. Of course, there's just big areas to improve. If he can improve on them, then you have a very tidy player here.